Has vision been cast in your church, but it's not moving forward? We're going to help you fix that today on the Church Revitalization Podcast.
Hello, and welcome to the Church Revitalization Podcast, brought to you by the Malphurs Group team, where each week we tackle important, actionable topics to help churches thrive. And now, here's your hosts, Scott Ball and AJ Matthew.
Welcome to the Church Revitalization Podcast. My name is Scott Ball. I'm joined by my friend and co-host, AJ Matthew. AJ, welcome to episode 174 of the Church Revitalization Podcast. We are going super practical today, very in the weeds a little bit on how to execute a vision in the church. I'm excited about this.
Yeah, kind of I think a necessary shift in point of view. Like you said, this is a bit in the weeds, but I think this is something that doesn't come naturally for a lot of people, or it's a perspective that I think you have to kind of force on yourself and your team to look at something like vision is a challenging thing anyway, and it's very experiential in a lot of ways. And so trying to find something that's a little bit more tangible to break it down into pieces, I think can be helpful for a lot of people. Yeah.
I thought that today I might start by giving maybe a little bit of an analogy or metaphor, or just sort of an example that's concrete, that's very easy to grasp. Okay. So let's imagine, AJ, that you walk into your home office there where you're at, and you flip the light switch on. Okay. And the light in your office does not come on.
Mm-hmm.
So now there's some narrative tension here. You've got AJ walking into the office. He wants there to be light in the office, but there is no light in the office. And so now you have to figure out, you've got a vision now, right, for what you want to be, which is in an office with light. And there's a gap between where you are and where you want to be, in that the light isn't turning on. So walk me through what you might do if this were to happen for you.
We were doing 120 volt, 60 hertz system.
I don't know anything that technical, my friend. Just the light switch is not turning on the light in your
15 amp circuit, or maybe it's up at a 20 amp circuit.
It's a circuit.
All right. Light bulbs, switch to light bulb. We got some wiring in here. We got some breakers going on. So yeah, if the light's not turning on, now in the simplest of terms, light bulb, probably your first piece to look at. But if it's
now, you might look around the room first and see, are other things that are plugged in, are they on?
Right. That's right.
It's like, is the power out at the whole house?
Yeah. You know, in my office, when the lights go out, the lights do not all go out because there's computers and there's, clocks. And there's all these things. The room is aglow with little LED things that blink and flash. So yeah, there's indicators, whether we've got like a system-wide shutdown, or if we've got maybe a particular circuit that's given us an issue.
Right. So then you're going to work through it. And we don't need to beleaguer this, but you'd probably check the light bulb first. If you change the light bulb, and it's a new one, and it still doesn't come on, then you're going to work to the next thing. Like, maybe there's something wrong with the switch, or maybe there's something wrong with the light fixture. You're going to work your way through it until you identify the problem.
Yeah.
This is systems thinking. You might not think of it as systems thinking. Systems thinking sounds like it's complicated, but it's not really that complicated. It's exactly what you would do if you walked into your office, you turn the light on, and it doesn't come on. You would systematically go through what could be causing this problem. And what you probably wouldn't do is make some emotional overreaction, right? Like, we need to totally tear down the entire office. Let's just bulldoze AJ's house because the light switch won't come on. And yet, when it comes to our churches, sometimes when we have a gap between our current situation and where we want to be, rather than thinking systematically through or systemically through how we can fix this problem, we go, well, we should just bulldoze the whole thing. Let's just do a complete refresh, restart, rebrand, this, that. And oftentimes, most of the time, that's not necessary. And so we have an emotional overreaction to our inability to achieve a vision. And it actually, it's more expensive, it's more difficult, it's more complicated than it would be if we were to think a little bit more.
That's right. That's important thinking. I mentioned this on an episode not too long ago, that I used to work with somebody that would have these over the top reactions to things whenever something didn't seem to be working right. It was like the day is ruined. And I would need to step in and go, well, let's just take this one step at a time. It might be something simple that we can make a small adjustment to, and it'll get you back on track. We don't need to throw everything away. Right. This is, kind of a basic troubleshooting mentality. We know what's supposed to work. It's not. Let's take this one piece at a time and figure out where the hang up is. And, and that's how we work through something that has known to work, or we think should work, and it's not. When you're creating something new, it's a similar thought process. We're creating a new system, a new process. What is the most efficient and effective way to get something done, in the fewest amount of steps, so that we're not wasting resources.
That's right. Yeah. And again, we all do this to some extent. In fact, the irony is, just before we started recording this, I've been talking to AJ about my printer in my home office isn't working. And I've been working on I've been trying to eliminate variables for a while, and it still has trouble connecting on a regular basis. That used to not be the case, but has been the case. And so now I'm fed up, and I'm like, I'm just going to buy a new printer. I'm done.
Your first assumption wasn't that you needed a new printer. You tried some other things first.
No, but someone who's more diligent probably would stick with it even longer. try to figure it out. And I'm going, there's an opportunity cost here. Like, there's a time cost. Like, the more I work on it, it's costing me time, and it's just not worth it. Just, I don't have a high volume printing here. So just a relatively inexpensive printer is going to solve my problem. At any rate, but I will say that the reason why I mentioned this, AJ, is it's the same attitude that we all have. It's just writ large. So when you have a problem with the staff person, you have a vision for what your staff, what you want your staff to be, and then they're not measuring up, they're not living up to what that standard is, or what that vision is that you have in your mind. Is your immediate thought, oh, we should just replace that staff person? We just didn't get the right person. Or should you invest in that individual and help them grow? Or begin to think differently when you hire next time. How can we make sure that we're getting the right candidate next time? So rather than getting in this endless cycle of turnover. So all that to say, we're all still in the introduction here. I want you to begin to think about, use systems thinking rather, to achieve that vision, whether it comes to your staff or anything that you want to accomplish. Rather than reacting emotionally, think systematically. How can we get from where we are to where we want to be in the fewest number of steps with the fewest number of resources? And that's what we're talking about today on the podcast by way of introduction. Hopefully I framed this up in a way that makes sense.
Yeah, I think we get it. So the first point that you've got down here, Scott, is to clarify the gap between where you are and where you want to be. So this is super fundamental. Assuming that the church maybe has done some kind of an assessment, or it has enough self-awareness to realize we aren't the church that we want to be. We have discovered or perceived what our vision is for the future. So we have kind of a picture of the future. And so here we are. Step one, we know where we are today. We've decided what we want the future to look like. We need to develop a system for this.
Yeah, we're actually going to be talking about this as this is being recorded and released. By the time we get to day 7 or 6 of the Church Checkup Challenge, which will be next Monday, January 16th, I think that is.
Yeah.
We're actually going to be talking about this a little bit, but so hopefully you're signed up for that. But we when we talk about a vision, we don't necessarily always know all the details about what something is going to look like when we get there. It's impossible to know all of the details that you need to know for the future. However, you can have a picture in your mind of where you want to go. And so this first assumes that you have that picture in place, that you know where you want to go, that you know what you want to accomplish, that you know what you want that impact to be in your community or on your staff or whatever it is we're talking about in terms of a vision. And then you need to just sort of take stock about here's where we are. So taking our example, it's like, we know we want to be in a room that has lights on, and now I'm in a room and the lights aren't on. That's an easy thing. Or if you're talking about your personal health, I know I want to weigh X number of pounds, and currently I'm at X number, Y number of pounds, and how am I going to get from here to there? You have to know where you want to go, and you have to be honest about where you are so that you can be clear about that gap. That sounds really fundamental, but I'm telling you, the majority of churches that we work with don't have clarity about who they want to be, aren't necessarily being honest about where they are right now. And so they have an ambiguous gap between here and there.
I mean, that's a good point. This is a little bit of a side trail here, but there are a lot of churches out there that never consider vision for the future. They're always just, here's who we are today, and here's what we do. But there are also a lot of churches that do think about the future, but they don't think about where they are and how to actually get there. They like putting something new out there, casting, a vision for the future, but then they don't take the time to really evaluate, or they're not honest about where they're starting from. And if you're not honest about where you're starting from, then you can't really get where you want to go, because you're going to go about it in wrong ways. So
imagine you say you want to go to the beach, but you're not really clear about where you're starting from. You'd have no way to know what road to take. Or how much it's going to cost, or what's the most efficient way to get there. You have to know where you are to be able to create a plan for where you want to go.
Yeah, right. And that's an important distinction.
Yeah.
Yep. All right. So the second piece is to view the church from outside the system. So, and this is a little bit of what we were just mentioning, but getting a change in perspective. Sometimes we can't see the forest for the trees. We can't see the future for the present because it's challenging, it's hard, and time seems compressed. We're always behind. But it's a necessary exercise to try to get a clear picture of what this new system is going to have to look like.
Yeah. So imagine, going back to maybe our map metaphor here, or directions metaphor. Imagine for a second that you were trying to create a plan to get to, I live here in Tennessee, and if I was trying to make a plan for driving to Hilton Head, South Carolina, if I was trying to make a plan based purely on the roads that I can see from my house, right? I'm going to have a limited view, or the roads that I know. Like, I know, okay, I might want to get on Interstate 26 and start heading east. I know that's going to get me in the general direction. And that's true, actually. You take 26 east, you keep going all the way. But if I'm thinking that's going to get me all the way to Hilton Head, I would be wrong. Like, there's more directions there. And the only way for me to see the direction I need to go is to zoom out a little bit and try to see the whole route as best I can objectively, and go, oh, okay, then I'm going to need to get on 95 and go south. Then I'm going to have to get off on, the Hilton Head exit. So, you have to see the whole picture. You may not be able to see very well when you're in the middle of it, and you might need help. And that's why we do what we do, is to help bring some objective perspective, because we're able to maybe see things from a slightly different angle. But also, you can apply this lens a little bit, I think, yourself. Try your best to take yourself out of it. Try your best to have a little bit of a indifference as best you can. And keep some distance.
Maybe another kind of continuing that, I don't know, metaphor, analogy, whatever this is that we're playing with, but maybe another way of looking at that is assuming that we're starting from Charlotte and not Bristol to go to Hilton Head. Like, hey, look, it's not that bad. I mean, we're starting here in Charlotte, and we're going to, and somebody has to go, well, hold on, but we're not there. We're not in Charlotte. And we have to do the hard work of getting from Bristol to Charlotte before the rest of that plan actually works out. I think we can assume that we're further ahead than we are, or skip some necessary steps, or maybe skip some hard work before it gets to the point where it might get a little bit easier and the vision becomes closer to achieve. So, that's that's something that I think we might have a tendency to do as well, is kind of pretend we're a little bit further along than we are.
Yeah, or to keep the metaphor going even more. Every time I look at my GPS when we drive to Hilton, we go to Hilton Head, not every year, but fairly often. And when I look at the GPS, it'll say from my house to Hilton Head that it's 6 hours or so. It's not accounting for traffic. It's supposed to account for traffic, but it doesn't, not really. And it's not accounting for when needing to stop, and it's not accounting or that I have 2 kids in the back seat, right? That need to stop and stretch their legs.
You need to add 2 hours to that.
Oh, easy. Yeah, easy. Yeah.
And you can't have the emotional response of, oh, we're never going to get there every time you have to stop and go pee or get some fries at McDonald's. So
yeah, that's right. You have to kind of be as objective as you can and go, okay, 6 hours. That's the GPS estimate. That's not realistic. Add 2 hours, add 2.5 hours or whatever it is for gas and meals and, potty breaks and all these things. But it's easy in the moment to look at it and just go, we should have gotten there in 6 hours. And that's not how real life works. And I know we're talking about a road trip and everyone knows this, but are you applying that same kind of thinking to your vision? Or are you thinking, I should be able to be there. I should be able to get there. We should be able to do this. It shouldn't be that hard. But try to think objectively about where you are and view your church from the outside as much as possible.
Yeah, that's good. All right, so our third piece here is to identify the simplest solutions first. Mm-hmm. Now, depending on where you're starting from and what your vision is, I mean, there might be a fairly simple solution. It might not be a major system to get there, but for others, it's going to be much more complicated, and there's going to be a lot more fundamentals that have to be worked on first. So your mileage may vary on what simple looks like to you. That'll be different for every church. But you need to break this down into pieces so that you don't maybe overcomplicate something that doesn't need to be. And I think also maybe a side piece to this is having an accurate inventory of your resources, especially human resources. Sometimes you might make something more complicated if we don't tap into the right people for the right positions, these kinds of things. We can overcomplicate something by leaving, some untapped potential.
Yeah, I mean, so one example as we were talking about this just jumped out to me and thinking on recent months and churches I've been with. One church I was with really has a heart to reach families, and as many churches do, but they're disappointed that they don't have as many young families in their congregation as a lot of churches are. And so they're immediately thinking of what ministry could we start? What program could we launch? What ministry could we do, or outreach do we need to do, or all these things? Kind of where their brain went. And as we're having our meetings, I'm looking outside from where we're having our meeting inside the church. I look outside their window, and on their property they had little league teams. Mm-hmm. They happen to have a baseball field on their property, and they have an agreement with the city, and the city uses it for little league. And I'm looking outside and I'm staring at, dozens and dozens. It's like someone kicked over an ant pile of young families, and all these kids just crawled out and I'm like, guys, they're right there. They're right there. Rather than trying to come up with something complex and go out there and this and that, let's just start with what God has blessed us with right outside our door. Mm-hmm. Literally, I can see the young families. They're right there. What are we doing right now to build a relationship with those families? And, at the time, not much. I mean, there are some, but not much. And so they were like, that's a great point. So start with the simplest solution first. Sometimes we can think we need to blow it up. We were joking that if AJ's light wasn't turning on, we wouldn't tear down his whole house. But sometimes in church, we think of the most expensive, most elaborate, most complicated solution to problems that might be solved at a simpler level first. And you should try those things first. It doesn't mean that there isn't sometimes a more complicated or expensive solution. Given enough problems in AJ's house, tearing it down might be the best option, but there is a long way to go from here to there. And a light bulb being burned out or not working is doesn't rise to the level of tearing the house down, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Does that make sense? I don't know if that metaphor works, but sometimes churches just assume it's got to be complicated or expensive, and very often it doesn't have to be.
Yeah, make sure that your team, this should all be this, there should be a team of leaders that's working through these things. Make sure there's at least somebody on your team with the ability to think of simple solutions first. Because sometimes if you're missing that element in a group of leaders that are trying to get something done, and something too complex, and everybody just jumps in like, oh yeah, that could be a problem. So I think this is a good plug for having the diversity in your team when you're trying to build a system that you've got the perspectives that can figure this stuff out as simply as possible first.
I think the most common complex solution, AJ, that comes up is a building project. There's always an assumption, if we build it, they will come. But I've got news for you, friends. You will be the same church in a new building.
And debt.
Yeah, and in debt. Yeah, right. And so don't assume. I've never seen that be the case. I've never seen a church outbuild their problems. So that doesn't mean it's never appropriate to build something. Obviously, it very well may be the case. But you will carry your same challenges and same lack of vision into a new building. So make sure you are. I've never met the church, AJ, that said our real problem is our location. If we were just in a different location, this church would be healthy. I've heard a lot of churches say that. I've never met the church where that was actually true. Now, is it possible that a different location could enhance or could leverage existing health? Absolutely. A healthy church in a better location is going to have more of an impact.
Yeah.
But an unhealthy church in a great location is still going to be unhealthy.
No doubt.
So you got to optimize the simple thing first.
Yeah. Okay, our fourth piece here is to think self-critically about your own role in this system development and in achieving the vision. So you mentioned, Scott, in the intro, or whenever we were just kind of talking through this before we got into the points of staffing issues, and I think this is a really great fit for this point. If we are feeling like the staff isn't performing the way they should, or if we've have had a revolving door in a particular position, then that's definitely one in which a leader needs to be looking self-critically at. Could it be me? if no one seems to be able to do this, maybe my expectations are wrong. Maybe my leadership style has some blind spot to it that I'm not aware of. But that's a great example in which self-critical thinking about your own role would apply.
Yes, I'm big on this. Whenever there's a problem in your church, you're not getting where you want to go or whatever, there might be systemic problems that you've got to fix that have nothing to do with you. Very often there will be some. But you should assume that the problem starts with you, that you have, at minimum, enabled the problems, the systemic problems, if not flat out created them yourself. And so that can be difficult to hear, and that can be difficult to be self-critical. But if you're looking around at your church and go, well, I've wanted to revitalize, but it's their fault, like, you should assume that it's your fault first, or at minimum that you've contributed to the problem. If it's not entirely your fault, you've at least been a part of the problem. And so the reason why I put this here at number 4 is we can identify that gap. We can try to think objectively about the church. We can identify some simple solutions. And even if we were to get to where we want to go, we're going to create a new gap and new problems if we don't think about ourselves, if we don't identify, how am I creating this problem? How do I keep this problem from cropping up again? And so, I think it's important that you think self-critically. How have I created this gap in the first place? What do I need to do differently? None of us are ever perfect. We're all on a journey of leadership. We're all always going to be growing. But don't, in your journey of reflection on the church and the gap, do not fail to do some introspection as to how you might have contributed to that problem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that certainly, there's a healthy way of doing that, and there's an unhealthy way of doing that. And there's people that, are too self-critical, or always assuming that, they're not good enough or something. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about
No.
just an honest look at yourself, and maybe asking for some outside opinions, just to make sure that you haven't become a barrier, or there's a blind spot that you're not aware of. So
Yeah. For example, I'll give an example from my own life. I am and AJ, you and I have talked about this. I just very often want to do, like, it's easier often. My instinct is I'll just do that myself versus passing it off. But we'll never get where we want to be in the Malphurs group if I'm not willing to pass certain things off. You have to be willing to just go, all right, I'm gonna pass that thing off, and it might be different than how I was going to do it, or they might do it differently, or it might even be bad. It might even be worse than if I had done it. But that individual couldn't grow in their ability, and I couldn't grow in my ability to give feedback if I don't let it go. And so I always have to check that. And I teach on leadership development and empowerment and all this stuff, but my instinct is I'll just do that thing. And that's one that I'm trying to unlearn, and I'm actively thinking about that all the time.
Yeah. I wrote a bunch of those emails for this church checkup challenge. Now, if none of my stuff got used, then I'll know you're like, ugh, I should not have outsourced that one.
How will you feel if I made some slight modifications to some of them?
I told you can use whatever you want. I was just trying to help. So, all right. Number 5, invite others to achieve the vision along with you. We need feedback. We need to be encouraging people. We've got to communicate this vision well. So part of our system is not simply what each leader who plays a role in it is going to do actively and over a long period of time. This is gathering everybody together. And if we're not exercising good communication skills and providing encouragement to the team and encouraging other people to get involved and work on it, then that's a necessary missing piece.
Yeah, I've been reflecting a little bit. We probably could do a whole episode on this sometime if we had enough information. But just thinking about the Southwest Airlines, again, as this is being released in January of 2023, there was a huge Southwest Airlines system collapse at the end of 2022. And I'd love to go into that on like why exactly did that happen? Not from a technical perspective, but from a leadership perspective. And I think that undeniably, at least one aspect of this is that leadership had its priority, which was maximizing profit, so to speak, or just thinking of it from a dollars and cents accounting perspective, but not really thinking about the airline from an operational perspective or customer service side. And I think that largely, those voices have been tuned out over the last several years, and that's coming home to roost. And I guess in this final point, what I'm trying to say is, if you really want to get from where you are to where you want to be, it has to be an everyone effort. People are going to see things that you will not see. And you need to be able to have a culture where feedback is welcome. Even if it hurts, even if they're wrong, like, you need to hear feedback, even if that feedback is totally off base. It's reality to them, and that might be informative. Like, that might tell you something that you need to know. And if you're going to get from here to there, it can't just be you. You need everyone's participation. And so you want to encourage people and keep them motivated and share each step along the way. And so if you don't want to have a total system collapse at your church, you need to have an environment that it really is collaborative, from your frontline volunteer all the way up to your senior level board and staff. Yeah.
Well, that's good stuff. And this is a great time of year to be thinking about vision. So I hope you are doing that in your church already. I hope at the end of 2022, you were thinking about this year, but if you haven't, it's not too late. It's never too late to start thinking about the future of your church and developing systems to achieve that vision. So, and if you need help doing this, man, we're all about it. So go over to malphursgroup.com and connect with us, because we would love to talk with you about helping you achieve that vision. And while you're over there, you can go to malphursgroup.com/174 to read today's show notes about this topic. There's also links in there to be able to watch the YouTube version of this if you'd like to see our smiling faces as we chatter. And as always, we're glad to have you. We'll be back again next week with another hopefully great actionable topic that you can apply to your church. Thanks for being with us.